Are my unpaid income taxes dischargeable in bankruptcy? Hi, I'm attorney Chip Parker with Blue Bee Bankruptcy Law. Most consumers I've consulted about bankruptcy believe unpaid state and federal income taxes are non-dischargeable, meaning that the taxes are still owed even after the bankruptcy discharge. Quite frankly, this is often, but not always, the case. Unpaid income taxes are going to fall into one of three categories of debt: priority, generally unsecured, or secured. If the tax debt is a priority debt, that means it is not eliminated through the bankruptcy process. If the tax debt is generally unsecured, that means that it is eliminated through the bankruptcy process. And if the tax debt is secured, it means that you owe no more than the value of the assets securing the tax debt as determined by your bankruptcy judge. I've created a flowchart which clearly walks you through a series of questions to help you determine in which of these three categories your tax debt belongs. I provided a link to this flowchart at the end of this video. The first three questions are known as the 3-year, 2-year, and 260-day rules. If you answered no to one or more of these first three questions, your income tax obligation is a non-dischargeable priority debt. Number 1. Did your income tax obligation come due more than 3 years ago? Keep in mind that income taxes come due on tax day of the year following the tax year. For instance, 2016 tax debts come due on tax day 2017. Normally, tax day falls on April 15th, but not always. In 2017, the tax day was actually April the 18th. If you file for an automatic extension, your taxes come due on October 15th following tax day. So determining whether you filed for an extension is critical to determine when the income tax obligation becomes 3 years old. Now, assuming you answer yes to number 1, you then ask whether your tax debt was actually filed more than 2 years ago. So even if your tax debt came due more than 3 years ago, you may have waited a year or so to actually file the tax return. As long as the filing date was more than 2 years ago, you're fine. Finally, if your first two answers were yes, you ask yourself whether the tax was assessed at least 240 days ago. This answer is usually always yes. And if you answer yes to all three of these questions, the income tax obligation is most likely generally unsecured, subject to the following exceptions. Are your tax returns fraudulent, or did you evade taxes? In my decades of representing thousands of consumers in bankruptcy court, I have never come across a client accused of tax evasion or tax fraud. These are very rare exceptions. The more significant roadblock to eliminating an income tax obligation is whether the IRS or the Utah State Taxing Authority has recorded a tax lien. If so, the tax obligation is a secured debt, but only to the extent of the liquidation value of the debtor's non-exempt property. A recorded tax lien creates a security interest on most types of property. There are specific types of property which are and are not subject to a tax lien. These various types of assets are beyond the scope of this video, but consider this. In a Chapter 7 or Chapter 13, there are legal mechanisms a debtor can use to shrink the size of a secured tax obligation. For example, if the IRS files a federal tax lien against you in the amount of $20,000, but your attachable assets are only worth $2,500, you can file a motion to value collateral in a Chapter 13 or a motion to redeem collateral in a Chapter 7, wherein the bankruptcy judge will determine that only $2,500 of the tax lien is secured by your property. The remaining balance of the IRS claim is generally unsecured. A tax lien only attaches to real and personal property located within the county where the lien was filed. Now, I've seen plenty of occasions where the IRS has filed their tax lien in a different county than where my client resides. This is unfortunate news for the IRS, but it's great news for my client. In such a scenario, the tax lien is limited only to attachable assets with no physical location, such as a bank account or a stock trading account or a patent. If you have an unpaid income tax obligation, I hope you found this helpful. If you're still unsure whether the obligation is dischargeable or not, you should speak with an experienced bankruptcy lawyer. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to follow the link below to get a copy of our income tax dischargeability flowchart.